Well, the fourth time's the charm. Looks like I might actually be live. Hi, everybody. It's Hank Linderman. I'm coming at you from Kentucky's 2nd District. I'm here in lovely Grayson County on right on the banks of the lovely Rough River. And it's a little bit misleading to be in such a peaceful location while our country is going through such serious difficulties. But anyway, June 2nd, Tuesday. I'm very happy that I'm able to reach out to you. I really had tremendous difficulty with Facebook. I had to use multiple browsers before I was able to get in. Mark Tomorsky, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, I've been at this for about a half an hour trying to get Facebook to cooperate, but I'm pretty dang determined. Hi Debbie, hi Bill, and hi Mark. Yes, everybody please do me a favor and share this video, and when you click on share you get the option to start a watch party, which is a great thing. Hi Barbara, how are you? Yeah, Debbie Kruger says she's interested in my take of all of this. Well, it's a very complex situation. It's all moving very quickly. Hi, Jim Porter. I'm glad you're here. Which reminds me, Jim Porter is a friend of mine from Danville, from Boyle County, and they've got a march tonight, or they've got an event tonight. And Jim, if you want to share that in the comments. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it, but there's another one coming up on Saturday in Danville that I will be attending. And please give my regards to everyone who's there. Danville's interesting because they have a black police chief, and he's going to be standing with the protesters, is my understanding. So my take on all this. Well, first of all, let's talk about what happened at the Episcopal Church yesterday that's across the street from the White House. Now, I was raised Episcopal. I grew up, that's where I started music. I was in church choirs in the Episcopal Church in New Milford, Connecticut, and also in New York City. I was even in the church. Tonight from 5 p.m. till 7 p.m. Danville is on Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be a peaceful demonstration. When you go to one of these things, I think you're very safe in Danville because I don't think there's going to be a lot of disagreement. But on the other hand, there are people who behave foolishly out there. So do your best to protect yourself. I would suggest you have some sort of eye protection. I'd suggest you disable your fingerprint opening of your telephone and things like that, but I think you're probably pretty safe in Danville. Hi Ellen. So let's get back to the Episcopal Church. I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and one of the things I loved about the Episcopal Church, besides the music, was that generally Episcopalians were pretty tolerant of whatever your viewpoint was. And if you'd show up at an Episcopal church and say, I really like your church, but I'm not sure how I feel about, and you'd give some example of religious dogma. I don't know how I feel about that. The Episcopal answer is something like, well, why don't you hang around? Look, we're having coffee and sandwiches in the back after the service. Come on back and hang out with everybody. So I've always loved the Episcopal Church. That's the church my family grew up in. That's what I grew up in. So for President Trump to go across the street, you know, half an hour before the curfew was going to be in effect anyway, so instead of waiting until 7 o'clock, he intentionally had the crowds cleared with tear gas. So this was intentional. And he strode over to a church. I'm going to read a text if I can find this. This is a quote from the Reverend Robert Hendrickson, St. Philip's Episcopal Church in Tucson, Arizona. This is an awful man waving a book he hasn't read in front of a church he doesn't attend, invoking laws he doesn't understand against fellow Americans he sees as enemies, wielding a military he dodged serving to protect power he gained via accepting foreign interference, exploiting fear and anger he loves to stoke. After failing to address a pandemic he was warned about and building it all on a bed of constant lies and childish insanity. This is not partisan. It's simply about recognizing the moral vacuum that is now pretending to lead. So that's pretty harsh, but I'm not seeing much that's inaccurate about it. So misusing the church is just his latest outrage. Yesterday, of course, he was talking about dominating. And Jim, I'll paste this quote. In fact, let me do that right now while I'm thinking about it. I'll see if I can grab this. And I'll paste this into the comments right now because you all, I think, would enjoy it. There we go. Um, uh, Yeah, by the way, Jeff Whitman says, yeah, and disable your face recognition on your phones. And the reason for that is that you can't be forced, if you happen to get arrested, and I don't believe there's any possibility of a problem like this in Danville, but if you're in Louisville, you might run into a problem like that. Or if you're in Nashville, or if you're in Chicago, or New York, or San Francisco, or Houston, or wherever you're going to be. Smart thing to do is disable the fingerprint and face recognition on your phone, because the police cannot force you. If you get arrested and you get, hey Mark, if you get picked up by an officer who's not strictly by the book, they might try to force you to open your phone, and you don't have to do it. If you've got a PIN number, they can't force you to give that, but they can physically hold your thumb and hold it against your phone, and they can hold your phone up against your face, and if that opens your phone, then they're in. You also maybe should shut off, make your phone lock immediately after you finish using it. This is only while you're going to a protest. So protect your eyes, protect your hands, protect yourselves. And hopefully it's a nonviolent thing. Now, the next thing I want to talk about at the protests that we're seeing, President Trump claims that there are what he calls Antifa leftist folks that are out trying to start problems. And that's not what I'm seeing. I don't really see leftists, but there have been reports of people dressed in black with full gas masks, the kind that have glass in them. So these are full coverage gas masks, black hats, a black umbrella, which is very strange, and ball-peen hammers and gloves, and they're just completely dressed in black. The example that I've seen is from a video, and you all can find this outside of the Milwaukee Police Department that was home to the officers that took part in the murder of George Floyd. Anyway, the crowd was outside, and ultimately I think they burned that police department. Fair enough, they were upset. And I want to say this really quickly. Stuff is stuff. You can replace buildings, you can replace cars, you can replace trucks. You cannot replace human lives. George Floyd is gone forever. And so we cannot replace lives, we can replace stuff. So anyway, back to that. While this was all going on, the crowd was gathering around the police station, and this character in black walks out and walks straight over to the AutoZone and just starts breaking windows with a ball-peen hammer and walking down and breaking all the windows. And some of the folks there confronted him, said, "Hey man, what are you doing? The cops are going to come get you if you do this." And he kind of ignores them. Remember, he's carrying an umbrella, which seemed very strange. You hear helicopters overhead in the video. And finally, some kid kind of starts messing with him and walks up with a joint and says, "Hey man, you want a toke?" And the guy kind of walks away from him. Finally, someone says, "Are you a cop?" And he starts walking away after he's busted all these windows. There were reports of this. I want to leave a little room here in case someone has gotten this wrong and told me about it. I haven't seen any video about it, but apparently this happened on Friday and Saturday night in Louisville. Maybe it was Friday night, when all the windows on 4th Street were broken, which began the process of looting. Yes, Billy, thank you. Floyd. I knew that I was getting his name wrong as I was saying it. I have another friend who recently passed away, and his last name was Lloyd, and that kind of threw me. George Floyd. Anyway, these guys now appear to be part of an effort to make it appear that leftist organizations, out-of-town agitators, are coming in to start the riots and trying to start looting, which then allows the president and his supporters to say, well, they were looting, we had to go in and stop them with the military, we had to go in with tanks. The guy in Minneapolis was apparently, again, a little bit of this is hearsay, so please don't bet your lives on anything I'm saying here, but this is what I have seen in print. Even in Forbes had a story about it. But apparently the guy was identified as a police officer. Now, the Minneapolis Police Department has denied that this is their officer. But his ex-wife apparently identified him, and another police officer came forward and said, those are our standard issue, full coverage gas masks. And it does make sense that if you can start a riot, then you can send in the army, you can send in the troops and bust heads, which is what President Trump seems to want to be able to do. Now, all of this is related to police departments, and they have been mistreating black members of our society for how many years? 400 years. We've not done right by black Americans for 400 years. But something's happened in the last 20, 30 years, and that is our police have become more and more militarized. Some of that might be due to war material that's left over from the war in Iraq that wasn't going to be needed, was given away to police departments. And so police departments now have these kind of assault vehicles and weaponry and protective gear that are more appropriate for an assault in Fallujah than they are for an assault in the west end of Louisville. And also I'm seeing stories recently that some of the trainers for our police departments in the United States have been trained by Mossad in Israel. The more we focus on violent confrontation and the more the police are allowed to have violent confrontation, we will have more and more. There are other studies, and unfortunately I can't show you these things I'm reading because of the recalcitrance of Facebook today. It just didn't want to work with me, and I finally got it working. But I found a story on, let me see if I can at least read a little bit from it for you. Give me a sec. I'll tell you what I was looking at today. First of all, I'm looking at the numbers in the USA. We're over 106,000 deaths. We had 638 new cases yesterday, so we are not getting rid of this thing yet. And in a very interesting take on that is certain states are now finding that they are the new hotspots, and I think Massachusetts is the new hotspot in the states. Let's see if I can find that. Yes, here we go. Yes, Massachusetts had 189 new deaths yesterday, and they've got 7,000 total cases, total deaths, and 3,800 new cases. They are the new number one. They've got the most amount of cases, new cases, and new deaths, which is terrible. Yes, this story, and it's on a website called Just Security, White Supremacist Infiltration of U.S. Police Forces, fact-checking. And what's going on here is, and there's a story that you can see in that Just Security website. They have an FBI report where the FBI has reported that they are aware of white supremacists who've been actively infiltrating police departments. And they also include retired officers. So who is policing the police? Exactly, John Alma. And we've seen this kind of thing before. I believe in Los Angeles there was a period of time when some of the gangs, the Crips and the Bloods, were infiltrating the police. And that led to a serious problem in the Ramparts Division, which, again, you can read about. That was about 15 years or so. And Woody Harrelson was in a movie called Ramparts that talked about some of that. Just incredible corruption there. So I'm going to look up. Yes. There's an unclassified law enforcement sensitive FBI assessment from 2006 that talks about white supremacists infiltrating law enforcement. So they've known about this for quite a while. Here's a quote from The Intercept. Federal law enforcement agencies in general, the FBI, the Marshals, the ATF, are aware that extremists have infiltrated state and local law enforcement agencies, and there are people in law enforcement agencies that may be sympathetic to these groups. Really not good. I've got another story from NBC that unfortunately I can't show you the headline. White nationalist group posing as Antifa calls for violence on Twitter. And again, this relates to President Trump wanting to blame this on leftists so he can release the hounds. From a website called Religion News Service, ahead of Trump's Bible photo op, police forcibly expel a priest from St. John's Church near the White House. A wonderful story in The Atlantic I'd urge you to check out. And I want to send this out to evangelicals, and I want to send it out to my opponent, Brett Guthrie. Those of you that are complicit in the actions of President Trump, you're going to pay a price. History's going to judge you. I want to talk about Brett Guthrie first. He's been silent. I haven't heard anything from him. He hasn't come out to declare to claim anything about the murder of George Floyd. He hasn't said anything. And he tends to hide. Whenever there's some controversy going on, he gets very, very quiet and disappears. So he's been silent. While our president is basically going into a church and throwing the pastor and a seminarian out of the church so he can use it for a photo op, holding a Bible which is not his. He even got asked, "Is that your Bible?" He said, "Well, it's a Bible." Those of you that are supporting this president, especially those of you in office, there's going to be a price to pay, and there's going to be an accounting coming. Now, I also want to talk about those of you that are evangelicals, and some of you are my friends, and you've been supporting this president. Well, we get the message now. This has nothing to do with any piety. You don't expect piety out of President Trump. You just want power. And there's going to be a judgment on your actions at this point. And the rest of us are very aware of what's going on. This guy is bad for the United States. I've been calling for weeks for him to step down, and he needs to do it. I won't be surprised if he's not the candidate. Oh, hi, Mary. Glad you're here. Let me go back and see what other headlines I've got that I'm looking at. Well, police erupt in violence nationwide. Yes, we know about that. So, and it appears that Attorney General Barr is the one who ordered the park cleared of protesters. Anyway, you kind of can't make this up. I've done about, I've said about all I need to say today. Thank you all for putting up with me being late. I'm going to keep wrestling, but this is one of the issues that we have. I'm looking for a way other than Facebook to do these broadcasts that's easy for us to check in on. We do now have a YouTube channel, but we're not fully up to speed with making that easily accessible. But we will find a way to do this. Carl, glad to hear from you. Dennis, glad you're here. Mark, glad you're here. Janikin, glad you're here. Mary, thank you all so much. You know I love you. We are going to get through this. That's the other thing I wanted to remind you all. We all have to do the right thing. We all have to do the right thing. Debbie Kruger says a Zoom call, and I think I can get up to 200 people on a Zoom call, and that's not a terrible idea. So thank you all, and it's really helpful to me to get the comments because that can guide me as to how to speak. Hope to see you all in Danville on Saturday. Please, you all take care of yourselves, and if you're going to go to any of these protests, look out for each other, do the right thing, and I'll see you tomorrow. Love you all. Bye.